isn't very, very bad.
A galaxy so far away, Middle-earth.
Long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, George Lucas said this.
There's a group of fans from the films that don't like comic sidekicks. They want the films to be tough and like Terminator, and they want to be, real guy movies. And they get very, very upset and very opinionated about anything that has anything to do with being childlike, which the movies are for children, but they don't want to admit that, or a comic sidekick, because they don't want comedy in these movies.
Okay, so why I'm playing this right now, first of all, is that Lucas was, in this moment, justifying the existence of Jar Jar Binks. And I suppose other things like the Ewoks. Now, personally, I really love the Ewoks. I've always loved the Ewoks, and that's probably because I was a kid when I saw Return of the Jedi. I know a lot of people who are older didn't love the Ewoks. Now, I hated Jar Jar Binks, and I don't think there's any justification for him, whether it's for kids or not. And I know that probably some kids like Jar Jar Binks, and there's been a whole movement to rehabilitate the reputation of the prequel movies in general. And they weren't all bad, but they sure weren't as good as the original trilogy. But that's not what I'm here to talk about today. I'm here to talk about this idea that Star Wars is for kids. Because this came up again recently with one of the episodes of Andor Season 2, in which there's a very near sexual assault of Bix by one of the Imperial lieutenants that's on the planet of Minarau, I think that's the name of it. It's the harvesting planet that's trolling Rebel Moon, Zack Snyder's movie. Anyways, a lot of people, I think, were not happy with this. They said there's no place for sexual assault in Star Wars. I think leading this charge was Star Wars Theory, the YouTuber who also said that like Vader would never stand for that sort of thing, which I think is hilarious, given that he's a genocidal maniac. Not Star Wars Theory, but Darth Vader. And I know that Star Wars Theory has a whole thing he's been working on with Vader, but Vader was a bad guy. The Empire is a analogy or analogous to Nazi Germany. They're space Nazis. The Nazis were big on things like genocide, murder, rape, etc. So I would say, here's what I would say. First of all, before we get into the rest of this, is that I think there isn't a place for sexual assault in Star Wars movies like the original trilogy. It'd be weird if it was in there, or the animated stuff. It would be weird if there was sexual assault or the threat of sexual assault in something like Skeleton Crew or The Mandalorian, because that is all directed at younger audiences or family audiences at least. But Andor is a different story altogether. What's interesting to me about this is as soon as this came out and everyone was saying Star Wars is for kids, Star Wars is for kids, I could only think of all the other times I've heard this, not just from George Lucas, but from people defending shows like The Acolyte or Obi-Wan Kenobi or some of these, really any of the Star Wars stuff has been defended using that line, Star Wars is for kids. When I've criticized these shows or the movies, saying, there's plot holes, saying that, a character like Obi-Wan Kenobi is done dirty in that show to make like little kid Leia look like she's so smart. A very common response to this is that I should kill myself. But another common response to this is that I'm sexist or racist. But another common response to this is that Star Wars is for kids. And so we should just shut the fuck up, because what business do grown-ups have talking about this kid stuff? And that's just silly to me. For one thing, it's not just for kids. It's never just been for kids. In fact, I would say that Star Wars is, generally speaking, for young to middle-aged men. Not that no one else can enjoy it, but these are the drivers of Star Wars fandom, right? People who grew up with Star Wars, whether they were, young adults when they watched it for the first time, or kids when they watched it for the first time. But this goes back to my whole theory of the half-interested girlfriend, right? And then in that I argue that stuff like Marvel, Star Wars, action, sci-fi genre stuff, the demographic that this is historically targeted is men, and men bring their half-interested girlfriends or wives along. They bring their kids along to see these things. And that's the driver of the economy behind Star Wars, behind Marvel, behind DC, behind zombie movies, whatever. Men. Women come because they want to enjoy this with their man. Kids go because, their dads were into Star Wars when they were young. And one of the huge problems we've had with Star Wars is that they've lost the thread when it comes to the primary audience for these things. They've tried to make it for, tweens with like the Acolyte, and for women with the whole Forces Female shit. But the problem with that is that's not the core audience. And you're just, when you chase away the core audience, then you lose the women and the children that have come along with their men or their dads or whatever. But that's so for a long time I've been arguing, we actually do need a more mature Star Wars, and Andor is a great example of how we can have a Star Wars geared towards adults. Not that all Star Wars should be as serious and dark as Andor or a spy thriller. This is the John le Carré version of Star Wars, and I love it personally. I think after we've seen 9 episodes so far, I've seen the whole season, but there's 9 have come out of season 2, and it's a very dark, very mature story. There is that, not actual sexual assault, but there's a threat of sexual assault. There's drug use. There's depression. There's genocide. There's very complex politics. It's a serious show, I think, for serious viewers. And it's not for everybody. For some people, it's too slow. I don't know how anybody thinks it's boring, but people do think it's boring, and that's fine, whatever. But to say that Star Wars is for kids is really doing a huge disservice to Star Wars. It'd be like saying comic books are for kids, and all comic book movies should just be made for kids. And that's crazy. I mean, I think a lot of them should be. I think they should be family movies, right? But I'm glad we have stuff like Joker, and I'm glad we have stuff like Logan. And I think it's okay to have serious, heavy, ultra-violent genre stuff, whether that's Star Wars or Marvel or DC. And sometimes that's going to include things like sexual assault or genocide. I mean, even the original movies and the prequels have pretty dark shit, like destroying whole planets or slaughtering children. I mean, the whole plotline with Anakin killing all those Padawans is seriously disturbing and dark shit. Like, definitely, I think killing children is as dark as the threat of sexual assault. So I just think it's terribly limiting to say that this is not, this shouldn't be part of Star Wars. I think we need to have a big tent approach to Star Wars. At the same time, I would say that Disney and Lucasfilm need to figure out who their audience is, which I've just discussed. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have strong female characters at all. I think that ever since, Princess Leia, men have loved Star Wars characters who are female. And I think Andor actually is a great model for this. I could do a whole other video on the great female characters in Andor, in particular Mon Mothma and Dedra Meero, on opposite sides of the whole galactic divide here. But I think Mon Mothma has been absolutely phenomenal in this season. And she's just a very complex character with she's courageous, but is forced to compromise. She's an idealist, but she has to take some cynical steps to succeed. It's all about compromise, right? Compromising her beliefs in order to get what she wants, just like so many characters in the show have to do. And then Dedra Meero, I love her character because what I hated about like the Jedi Hunter in Obi-Wan Kenobi is it was so clear that they were putting her on this redemption arc. Her character was so messy. Like, she couldn't just be a bad guy. And I think she couldn't just be a bad guy because they were scared about making a black woman a bad guy, and that's crazy to me. Dedra, on the other hand, is just straight up bad, and yet you still have some degree of sympathy and empathy for her, and you see her humanity crack through, like in the most recent, in episode 8, when there's the riots on Gorman, and if there's just huge overwhelming force to put those down. Like, she is like having a panic attack at one point. And you can see that even though this is her doing, this is what she wanted, that she is feeling the weight of it and the shock of it because she is still human. And I love that. And I think that when you have a serious Star Wars show like Andor, when it's created for adult viewers and not kids, you can create these very complicated and very fascinating characters who have such gray morality around them, or who are just straight up bad or heroic. I don't know. I just think that limiting Star Wars to just be a thing for kids is bullshit. And using George Lucas's little quote there as like, hey, this is gospel, this is canon, George Lucas said it, really not only just is nonsense because of all the non-kid stuff we've seen in Star Wars before, but also because it's pretty obvious Lucas is responding to fans who don't like Jar Jar Binks. And let me be clear here. I think a lot of those same fans loved other childish elements in Star Wars, like C-3PO and R2-D2 and various other cutesy characters. Jar Jar was just a bad character. You can't defend him just saying, well, it's for kids. Like, I'm sorry, a lot of kids have better taste than that. So anyways, I do need to talk about Andor more. I'm loving it. I know it doesn't seem like it's getting a ton of buzz, and I just think it's one of those shows that, because it's called Andor instead of something a little bit more compelling like Star Wars Rebellion or something like that, I think people just aren't coming around to it. And I think because it is a little bit harder viewing, it takes patience. You have to kind of let the story build. It doesn't just give you lightsaber battles and all that right off the bat, but it also doesn't insult its audience with, witches chanting about the power of one, the power of two, etc., etc. It's good TV. I mean, honestly, I think it's one of the best spy thrillers I've ever seen, even outside of Star Wars. Just like straight up, like amazing. And other people, I'm just going to rant a little bit longer. Other people are like, well, it's not Star Wars. This is what I come here for, to watch Star Wars. It's, where's the Jedi? Where's this? And that? It's like, yeah, but we can also, again, we can have stories about Jedi. We can have stories about, the smugglers and the thieves and the rebels. We can have stories about all these different things. We shouldn't limit what Star Wars can be or the different stories that we're telling in Star Wars. We should celebrate the fact that at least one of them has good writing, an amazing production, and it's an enormously expensive show, and it really does show with the costumes, the production, the sets, the quality of actors, and I'm really excited for everyone to see the final 3 episodes of the season because they are really great. Although I think the 8 and 9, the rebellion, the riots on Gorman, and then the rescue basically of Mon Mothma from Coruscant, those are fantastic, and that's pretty peak Star Wars right there for me. So let me know what you think. Is Star Wars just for kids, or is it actually a little bit more complicated than that? Is there room for things like showing how bad the Empire is via some of their officers being a little rapey, or is that just not belong in Star Wars? Hard stop. Let me know in the comments, and I appreciate you watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Peace.
Sauron, won't you make some rings for the hobbits and the Wookiee kings, for the elves and the Jedi Council too? Yeah, oh please, Darth Thanatar, up on the Death Star with Elrond, a Wookiee and